Welcome back to the pharmaphorum podcast. In this episode, I speak with Leo Grady, CEO and founder of Jona, a company that provides at-home personal microbiome profiling, utilizing genomic testing and AI to uncover the effects of our gut on our health and how best to maintain optimal diversity and the number of bacteria in the GI tract. It might have taken a while to pick up speed, but microbiomic studies hold serious potential when applied to a wide variety of diseases and disorders. Grady runs us through the possibilities. It's fascinating, it's enlightening, and it is veritably exciting. And as ever, thank you for listening. This is web editor Nicole Rowley, and today I have with me Leo Grady, founder and CEO of Jona, the at-home personal microbiome profiling kit from a company that brings together AI experts, clinicians, dietitians, and scientists in order to explore the new frontier of human health, uncovering the relationship between that and the gut microbiome. The benefits of a healthy microbiome are, as is ever unfolding lately, seemingly endless. While some benefits are obvious, such as helping with inflammation, metabolism, immune function, and nutrient absorption, others are far less known, but equally, if not more, vital to overall human health. So it is today that Leo and I will be discussing the fascinating topic that is the gut microbiome. Firstly, though, Leo, perhaps you could share with listeners and with me what led you on the path to exploring the microbiome and your journey to what you do today with Jona.
Thank you, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here. I grew up around microbiology. My father was a virologist, and so it's an area that, I grew up going to the lab with him. And as I got older, several members of my family have had autoimmune conditions: Crohn's disease, colitis, celiac, and then my son has undefined GI disorder or issues. And so through that personal experience, I came to encounter the microbiome over and over as not only one of the potential causes for some of these disorders, but also as something that could be used and harnessed to help improve those conditions. So it's been an area of fascination for me for a long time. And then I kept seeing more and more studies come out that would show the microbiome is linked with autism or behavior or Parkinson's disease or obesity. And it just seemed like an area that was really exciting, that had a large potential impact. And yet at the same time, it felt like a lot of this incredible research was not being applied in a clinical setting or made accessible to consumers and patients. And I came to the conclusion that a lot of that had to do with the fact that the microbiome is so complex. And I really felt that AI was going to be the key technology that would allow us to cross that gap into making all of this research actually accessible and actionable.
Thank you, Leo. As you say, this word exciting, I think can safely be applied to the microbiome. So if we turn our conversation now to discussing that, new studies have shown that there is a connection between the gut and the brain. Our microbiome has the potential to influence cognitive function, mood, and behavior, and has implications in conditions like anxiety, depression, and more. There's also evidence to suggest that early exposure to microbes in the gut may contribute to the prevention of allergies and the development of a balanced immune system. So let's start there. Could you perhaps provide a general overview of the gut microbiome landscape for listeners, from mental balance to early exposure to allergens in infants?
Yeah, absolutely. So the gut microbiome consists of trillions of organisms that live really throughout the GI tract. And that consists of bacteria, fungus, viruses, protists, archaea, all sorts of different organisms that live in our guts. And one of the things that many people don't appreciate is that the GI tract is a sensory organ in many ways. The immune function is very tightly concentrated around the GI tract. And the immune system also responds or doesn't respond to these organisms in your gut. So every time you eat something, it's not sterile. If your immune system went into overdrive to kill all the organisms in that food, you'd constantly be in a state of overactive immune function. And yet we know that our immune system doesn't react most of the time when you eat certain foods, even though they're not sterile. It's not reacting to all these trillions of organisms that are in your body. And so there's a strong relationship between that composition of the organisms and what your immune system reacts to and chooses not to react to. And as a result, you mentioned food allergies. There are a lot of autoimmune conditions. The microbiome has been implicated in many of these processes because of that connection with the immune system, which we don't fully understand, but we're still working out. In addition, what many people don't understand is that the GI tract has its own nervous system, the enteric nervous system, which sometimes people call it the second brain. It's connected with your actual brain through the vagus nerve, and 90% of the serotonin in your body is produced in your gut in this enteric nervous system, and 50% of your dopamine. And so the ability for your gut to impact your brain and vice versa is incredibly high. In fact, more signals go up to your brain than come down into your GI tract. So we're just beginning to understand the connection between what they call the gut brain axis, but more and more studies are showing that there's a profound connection there, which can be responsible for a variety of different diseases, but also, as you mentioned, mood, depression, anxiety, and so on. I think we all have the experience of knowing somebody who gets hangry, who gets changes their mood when they're hungry, and I think this is just one common example of how your gut impacts your brain.
Thank you, Leo. Yes, we'll come back to diseases and disorders a bit later, but I want to first of all sort of segue now to what Jona specifically specializes in, which is in data standardization and adoption of machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies when it comes to exploration of the microbiome. So can you tell us more about that, about the role of AI in studying the gut microbiome, and indeed provide as much information as you can about what goes on there?
Yeah, of course. So sometimes people talk about the microbiome and they say it's a new organ. And in many ways, it does behave like an organ. It's about the same, weight. If you were to ball up all the organisms, it acts like an organ in many ways. But it's not an organ that you can see with, an MRI or an ultrasound. It's not like a kidney or a heart or anything like that. It's basically an organ of data. And this is why I think that AI is really the key technology that's going to allow us to understand the microbiome, to see it as if we had an MRI of this organ that will allow us to both understand the microbiome and take action on it. So where we started, Jona, is to recognize not only the complexity of the microbiome, but also the complexity of the scientific literature. So every single month, there are more than 2,000 papers published in PubMed on the microbiome. There's no human possibility that somebody can keep up with all of that science and all of that research and all of these studies. So we built a large language model to read all of the science that's being published every month. And then we offer a service which includes a microbiome test. We do deep shotgun metagenomic sequencing. We identify all the bacteria, the fungus, the viruses, everything in your gut down to a strain level. Then that AI system reads the literature and can produce a summary for you by connecting the patterns in your microbiome to every study that's linked that pattern to a disease, matches your microbiome to allergies, to symptoms. And then we go a step further, and the AI reads all the literature on the different interventions you could take, all the different actions. Could be diet, could be lifestyle, could be supplements, could be drugs. And then we create a virtual microbiome, like a digital twin of your microbiome. And we say, what happens if you go vegan? Well, we know that from these studies, so we can assess what that virtual, vegan you would look like. What happens if you go keto? What happens if you take fish oil? What happens if you take metformin or some other medication? And based on all of these studies, we can produce this digital twin of your microbiome, and then we can do the same analysis on that digital twin and say, okay, is the vegan Nicole, does she look, more healthy or less healthy than the current Nicole? And by doing this, we can provide all of this information to patients, to doctors, and really allow them to understand not only what conditions, diseases, symptoms, allergies have been linked to their microbiome, but also the actions that they can take to lessen those associations and ultimately guide them to achieve their health goals.
Yes, it's fascinating stuff, isn't it? I mean, we are talking proper personalization. So, if we now look at disease specific applications, I mean, we've been talking about autoimmune and allergies and alluded to the applicability in neurodiseases, which we'll come on to in a moment. I want to talk about, for example, oncology. The microbiome has been extensively studied and researched in relation to cancer, such research suggesting that alterations in the composition and function of the gut microbiome can influence cancer detection and progression. Studies are promising, but it's important to note that the relationship between the microbiome and cancer is, this word you keep repeating today, complex or complicated, and varies depending on the type of cancer and other individual factors. So could you perhaps comment on that for me, Leo?
Yeah, absolutely. We see the microbiome as being able to help cancer care in three ways. First is in the early detection, as you were pointing out. Second is in the selection of the right treatment. And then the third is in the post treatment recovery. So let me talk about each of those three. So, in the early detection, changes in the microbiome have been linked to colon cancer, colorectal cancer, to pancreatic cancer, gastric cancer, liver cancer, cholangio, even breast cancer and prostate cancer have been linked to changes in the gut microbiome. And so, whether or not those changes are causal, whether the changes in the microbiome are actually causing these cancers or not, it does offer the opportunity for detecting these changes early as an early warning sign of these these cancers. And that opens up the possibility that we can do a stool test and be able to test for a panel of different cancers based on these changes in a person's microbiome. So that's the first part on the early detection side. In terms of treatment selection, more and more studies are showing that the composition of a person's microbiome is predictive of who's going to respond to different medications, particularly immuno-oncology medications. And as a result, it seems possible that we could look at the composition of a person's microbiome, predict which medication is going to be most effective for them, and even if that medication is not going to be most effective for them, work to change their microbiome to be in a situation, in a state that would actually increase the efficacy of these therapies. And then the last part is in the post-treatment recovery. When cancer patients come out the other end of chemotherapy and radiation and surgery and everything else that they go through, and ultimately they beat the cancer, many of them actually end up with GI problems. And the thinking for why that is the case is because there's such an obliteration of the person's microbiome during this process that it can also end up causing troubles. And as a result, if we can maintain the person's microbiome through treatment and help them recover more effectively, then I think it offers the possibility to help people avoid some of these complications that occur during treatment.
Yes. Could we perhaps tunnel more into the the causes of the obliteration of the microbiome. What exactly is going on in the GI tract by cause of medications or treatment? I mean, this is something that's been spoken about in relation to antibiotic use as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And antibiotics are frequently given at multiple stages during cancer treatment, whether it's for chemotherapy to prevent infections or during surgery. And so many times cancer patients receive multiple rounds of antibiotics. And then there's the chemo itself, which can be, have a very strong negative effect. I mean, it's there to kill the cancer, but it can also, seem to have a strong impact on the microbiome as well. And as a result, there have been a number of studies in the oncology world showing that a person's microbiome post treatment is really very altered compared to when they go into treatment in the first place, or what a normal microbiome might look like.
And what is that alteration? I mean, is there still this sort of trillions of, or 1 trillion organisms within the GI tract? Is it sort of a lesser number? What's going on internally?
There certainly have been reports of lesser numbers, but also lesser diversity.
Mhm.
That you see microbiome that tends to be more concentrated in certain organisms or certain phyla. And so there's just less of the diversity that's been associated with a healthy, normal gut.
Thank you. So there are also several promising studies that suggest alterations in gut microbiome composition can influence the development or progression potentially of Parkinson's disease. Microbiome, after all, plays a role in regulating inflammation, as I mentioned earlier, producing neuroactive substances, and influencing the gut barrier. And disruptions in these functions are what have been associated with neuro diseases, including Parkinson's. So I was wondering if you could perhaps provide comment on this, Leo. And I'd also like to maybe touch upon the link between the gut microbiome and autism, if you're able.
Yeah, and I'll preface this by saying I'm not an MD. I'm not a neuro specialist. My PhD was in AI, and I've worked in healthcare for the last 20 years. But the research is really compelling here, particularly with Parkinson's disease. There's some evidence to suggest that the cellular level changes that are associated with Parkinson's disease actually occur earlier in the gut than in the brain, and that the changes to the microbiome composition that have been associated with Parkinson's are actually occur earlier than the development of symptomatic patients. And as a result, it seems possible that one could look at these, at least to be able to potentially do early detection of Parkinson by looking at these microbiome changes. Furthermore, insofar as those organisms are causal in any way, that it may offer another treatment vector or prevention vector with Parkinson's. In fact, one of the surprising things about Parkinson's is that an early symptom is often constipation. And so, can you imagine if you were having constipation, you would not be likely to go to a neurologist. You'd likely, if you go to the doctor, go to a primary care, to a GI specialist, and they're not going to be having the tools to really look for Parkinson's. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity with the microbiome to do early detection and potentially even prevention or treatment as we go forward. With autism, there have been a number of studies in animals and mice where some of the autism models that have been established in mice have been shown to be related to the microbiome composition during the early formative years. And that specifically certain organisms being missing during that formative period have been linked with autism in these animal models. Now, there's quite a bit of active research on this in humans. It's harder to do these trials in humans because you can't ethically remove organisms that you think might be beneficial to someone. but there seems to be a strong developmental link to the brain and the healthy functioning of the brain based on the gut microbiome at birth.
Thank you, Leo. So, elsewise, Saventure has released its report, Microbiome Progress, a look at 2023, and that provided an overall assessment of research and development linked to the human microbiome across the globe. The main themes of that report included perspectives on the first generation of microbiome products, fecal microbiome transplantation, and next generation products such as live biotherapeutics products, or LBPs, and more traditional drugs. So I was wondering, we've been talking a lot about the gut microbiome, whether you're able to discuss how targeting human microbiomes, plural, is so much more than merely the intestine.
That's absolutely true. We have a microbiome that lives on our skin, in our mouth, in our lungs. There's a vaginal microbiome, and all of these microbiomes have been shown to be linked to a variety of different health issues. And as we learn more about them, I think we will have an opportunity to either get early warning signs of issues, or be better in terms of prevention and treatment of a variety of issues. I think there's more known about the gut microbiome, and I think it's been linked to a wider variety of health conditions. But there's no question that these other microbiomes are also important and deserve more attention.
Thank you. And are you able to comment on some of the first generation of microbiome products that I mentioned before?
Fecal transplants are very exciting. This research has been ongoing for quite a while, and there are descriptions of fecal transplants that go into history and antiquity. When we see fecal transplants in action, there's a wide spectrum of different outcomes that have been observed. There are some people that have really been almost cured of chronic diseases with the fecal transplants. For others, there's been no effect. And then for others, there's been really negative, strongly harmful effects. And as a result, the FDA in the US has been firm about, not engaging in fecal transplants as therapies, except, with the FDA approved products that are out there now. So in the last year or two, we saw the first therapeutic developed for recurrent C. difficile. That was by Ferring, and that used a controlled fecal transplant. And then following that, there was an oral microbiome therapeutic developed by Series Therapeutics that was for the same indication of recurrent C. difficile infections. So I think we're just at the beginning. These FDA approvals are really exciting. It's an incredible milestone. Given all of the different conditions that have been linked to the microbiome, I think this is a really bright future and a huge opportunity for all of us.
Yes, it's exciting indeed, isn't it? It comes back to the place of Jona's technology, really. I mean, this fecal microbiome transplantation, actually, the veganism you mentioned earlier, those have in humans been attempted in twins, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that the fact that we see such an impact by fecal transplants, but it's complex, right? But we see such an impact tells me that this is really powerful stuff that we're dealing with, but we don't fully understand it. We can't fully control it. And this is why I think we need the kind of technology that we're building at Jona to be able to look at person's microbiome, really understand what's going on in there and what it's been linked to, and where we want to change it to, so that we can actually build the capability to engineer the microbiome to move from one state to another state. Maybe that's through a fecal transplant, maybe that's through dietary changes or medications. But at the end of the day, where I think we need to go as a field is to be able to fully understand somebody's current state and how we move it to a desired state.
You've sort of guessed at my concluding questions there, Leo. So I wanted to, before we go to the future horizon outlook, perhaps we could combine the two together. I wanted to know whether, in response to the skeptics, the naysayers who might still exist out there when it comes to the potential of microbiomic studies, what could you say to them that would convince them that all this scientific literature that is showing great potential has substance? There is a reality for tangible use there, and also microbiomic studies as a whole. What's the future in the next 5-10 years? What do you see on the horizon?
Well, as far as the skeptics go, I don't think I have yet to meet anybody who will tell me that the microbiome is unimportant or uninteresting or really questions the science that's been done. I think where I see skepticism is in where are we in the journey of understanding the microbiome? Is it too early to say anything? Or can we already start applying some of what we do know? And to some degree, I think that has to do with what level of evidence somebody is looking for in order to ultimately make a decision. Randomized controlled trials are the gold standard in medicine, and those will come, and those have there have been some of those. There's a lot in medicine where we don't have randomized controlled trials to prove every little thing, and there is emerging research that can be helpful not only for getting to the root cause of issues and also being able to make interventions that are effective. So I think, as the evidence piles up, as people start seeing in their own life, in their own clinics, a better understanding of the microbiome and actually the benefits of engineering it into a new state, then more and more people are going to come on board. But as I mentioned, I have yet to meet anyone who is skeptical that the science is real and that the microbiome is important and exciting. As far as what to expect in the future, the microbiome is being linked to such a wide variety of different diseases, and we're still working out causality in many cases. So that is an area of active research. You mentioned Parkinson's, autism, also Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. All of this has been linked to the microbiome, as well as some of these disorders like PANS, where somebody will have an infection and it seems to have a strong neurological trigger into a new state. So this research is very active in the neurospace specifically, but really across the board in terms of autoimmune disease, obesity, metabolic disorders, food allergies, in oncology and drug response and precision medicine, but also athletic performance, longevity. All of these have been linked to the microbiome, and all of them are receiving an incredible amount of attention and active studies. As we move forward with all of that, I believe that we're going to see a whole range of new diagnostic tests as well as new therapeutic capabilities. And you even see some people that are using the microbiome itself as the target of a drug. In other words, building drugs that will target organisms in the microbiome rather than the human cells to have a therapeutic effect. So I think we're in a really exciting time in a really exciting area, and I'm really thrilled for us to be able to build out the data and the AI layer to help us really at Jona to be able to understand the microbiome and then determine how best to engineer it into the desired state.
Thank you. As you say, on the precipice of huge potential there, with just a little deeper an understanding yet necessary. Thank you, Leo. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Nicole. This was fun.
And so that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find out more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments of the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The Pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and Podbean, where you can find and subscribe by searching for Pharmaphorum. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily news and analysis bulletins, and follow us on Twitter, or X nowadays, at @Pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.